911 operators, what is a call that gave you the chills? Hey, just before we get into this video, I want to let you know that this one has a lot of talk about taking one's own life, and if that's something you're not cool with, don't want to listen to, whatever, this is your warning. And now, on with the stories. Call came in around 6 a.m. in the morning. Teenage kids had gone downstairs to find their father collapsed on the kitchen floor. Per his son, he was unconscious but still breathing. Per protocol, I confirmed their address, sent the case to dispatch, and stayed on the line. I had the kids turn him onto his side into the recovery position. I reassured them. For a couple of teens, they really held it together. I told them to monitor his breathing. They said he was still breathing, kind of. And that's when I heard it on the other end of the line. That wasn't breathing. That was the death rattle. Agonal breathing. That was the first time as an EMD I'd heard that awful sound in a live environment. God help me, may it be my last. In an instant, I upgraded the case. This was no longer an unconscious patient, but somebody in cardiac arrest. Dispatch was notified. I saw additional resources being attached. I told the two teenagers in a voice that I hope had even a fraction of the composure they exhibited that we needed to roll their father onto his back, that we needed to commence CPR straight away. I work in a job where you have people in their 20s and 30s calling you up screaming, hysterical and utterly inconsolable because of a freaking headache or a cut finger or a sore back. And yet these two kids, barely into their teens, were pumping away at their dad's chest without hesitation, working in tandem to perform the best damn CPR I've ever heard over the phone in my 6 years as an EMD. All I could hear in the background as I helped them keep pace was their father's rattling breathing. I'm not religious, but you can bet I pray to God Almighty to just let this one live. Please, just let these kids keep their father. Is that so much to ask? At least give the guy a chance to say his goodbyes properly. It was only when the sirens in the background drowned out all other sounds and the crews confirmed they were at scene that I quickly told those kids how proud I was of them and disconnected. I made it a point of mine to never follow up jobs like this, but curiosity eventually got the best of me. I found out a few days later the guy had passed away. I wish I had never followed up. Following up on calls that you grew emotionally attached to seems dangerous in that line of work. I guess it's just the brutal truth of it that not every case is going to end well. In fact, a large portion probably won't. But it sounds like OP did literally everything they could from their position. So good on them. Some things just don't work out, I guess. I hope those kids are doing alright and that the man is resting in peace. Story 2. Little after 2 a.m., I got a call of a car gone off a 100-foot embankment into the river. As officers arrive on scene and begin rescue and body search, I get relayed the name of the deceased who had been friends of mine. I knew 5 out of 6 in the car, and as the search was wrapping up, I began to get calls from parents of the victims who knew me. Rough night in a rural area. Story 3. It was a year ago. A father called a 911 stating his 2-year-old daughter wasn't breathing. I had tried to instruct him on how to do CPR while I got the ambulance out there. He kept refusing and telling me he didn't know how. Besides me insisting I would help him do it, he told me that his daughter had fallen down the stairs 2 days before the call and that he didn't know what was happening. The mother was screaming in the background. I started to get nervous due to the fact it was 2 minutes into the call and I was begging this man to do CPR on his baby. He gave the phone to what I'm assuming is the sister of the mother, and I gave her instructions on how to attempt to revive this little baby girl. I told the officers something was going on with this, and I didn't feel right about it. They got there, and I never knew anything until the news a few weeks later. The father and grandmother were arrested for murdering this little baby. She passed away due to consistent abuse by the father when the mom was gone or at work. I never forgot that call. Story 4. Wife just shot herself in the head. Husband wasn't sure if she was beyond help, so I have him start CPR. At this point, I'm assuming she's gone, but I want to give him something to do and be able to look back and feel like he did everything he could have. While pumping on her chest, their kid, who is about 10, walks in. He starts trying to have the kid help, so I tell the kid to grab a towel and apply pressure to the wound. I'm telling a child to hold pressure on his mom's self-inflicted gunshot wound to her head while coaching the father through CPR. The kid was super focused. Dad was about to lose it multiple times. When medics arrived, she was viable. They transported her. I just assumed she didn't make it, but there's always a chance. We rarely get closure. Story 5. Occurred about 2 weeks ago. Got a pretty standard, non-urgent difficulty breathing call for meds. Get units started, no problem. Last thing I tell her is to unlock her front door and come back to the phone. She had corded a landline. She gets up and just never comes back. I get an open line. Can hear some shuffling in the background, nothing distressing though. Honestly, just thought she put the phone down and forgot about it. But we were supposed to stay on the line until confirmation of everything, so I didn't hang up. When the fire department gets there, they inform me she had died, home alone while on the phone with me. She basically dropped dead immediately after unlocking the front door. I was shocked, and I had to go back and re-listen to the call knowing that woman was dying for a good 2 to 3 minutes, and no one could save her. Story 6. One of my first calls out of training was from 2 teens who had left for vacation with their dad, and when they returned home, they found their mom's dead, bloated, rotting corpse in the garage. She took her own life. I don't remember much of the call because another operator took over when I sort of froze up. I only worked as an operator for about half a year. Edit. When I say out of training, I meant initial training for taking calls only. I was still training for other duties when I left the agency. Funny enough, most of my calls for the rest of that day were minor things such as fender benders and butt dials, which happens way more often than people maybe believe. Story 7. My aunt was a 911 dispatcher for a couple of months, and she told me about these 2 calls she had. This little boy around 6 or 7 was bawling on the phone because his big brother had shot himself in the head, and his face and brains were everywhere. The other one is that this little girl, I think was 3, had called because her stepdad was beating the crap out of the mom, and my aunt said that you could hear the mom screaming in the background. And so after a while, the dad came in and beat the crap out of the girl for calling the police. And so my aunt had to hear this 3-year-old little girl getting the crap beat out of her while her mom was trying to stop the stepdad. Dispatchers really do have one of the toughest jobs, huh? Because they just have to listen, and all they can do is dispatch. After hearing something like this, I have nothing but respect for the dispatchers. It does not sound like an easy job. I don't think I could do it. Also, I hope that man never sees the light of day again. Is that too much to ask? Story 8. I saw a YouTube video once of a lady whose car had gotten stuck in water. I think she was delivering newspapers or something and got caught in a flash flood. The water was creeping up to her neck, and the 911 operator was telling her to shut up, stop crying, and that it was all this lady's own fault. Poor lady drowned and died while still on the call. Story 10. Saw a program where I learned an ambulance has to be called for what's referred to as someone's final journey. Basically, they're taken from their home when they have days or weeks to live to a hospice to live out their final days. What really got me is that I was expecting a really frail 90-odd-year-old guy who could barely move or speak. No, it was an 80-ish-year-old guy who was completely with it, losing his battle with cancer. He was just getting himself ready like he was going out on any other day, getting dressed nicely, doing his hair, fussing about the house and other stuff, joking around with his wife. This was the last time he would see his home, the last journey he would make, and it was like any other day. And although it was nice to see how well he's dealing with everything, the reality is just heartbreaking. One day he's telling the paramedics how he used to design motorbikes and remembers all the details and is so passionate about it. And within a few weeks, he will no longer be alive. Story 11. EMT here. When you're in this profession long enough, these people that are experiencing the worst moments of their life just become a job to you. Like, yeah, there is some person dying in the back of my ambulance, but I'm also thinking what I'm going to eat for dinner later or my plans for tonight. I find that kind of chilling. As for something that stuck with me, it's this sick, obese lady who was also a hoarder and had a ton of animals in her house. We picked her up from a hospital and had to transport her to a disabled hole because she can no longer take care of herself, even though she's all still there mentally. When we got to her room, it was no bigger than a cheap motel, and she began crying. It was this kind of cry where she had the realization that she no longer has control of her life, and that she'll rot away in this small room until she dies. You never really think about the emotions that people go through in situations like that, and my heart broke for her. Story 12. Not 911, but alarm dispatcher. We monitored for an assisted living tower, kind of halfway between independent living and a nursing home, and one night we started getting fire alarms. 1 apartment unit to start, then 2, and it quickly multiplied. We sent the fire department on the first alarm per procedure and got no answer at the front desk of the place since it was after hours. After 1 or 2 updates on the multiplying alarms, I waited to get disposition to find out if we had an actual fire. It certainly looked like it. The alarms seemed to be coming coming in sequentially from room to room and floor to floor. The thing was, it didn't just stick to fire alarms. We also monitored the dedicated medical alarms in these apartments, and they were lighting up along with the same pattern. We report those to FD dispatch too, so I was at the limit of what I could do. When I finally got an update, it felt like my chair was spinning. Yes, there was a fire in this apartment building, and they were trying to put it out. There were even some legitimate medicals, but those were most likely people signaling that they were trapped in their rooms. The other possibility, and it was impossible to tell the difference unless you were a firefighter on scene, was that the medical button or pull cord mechanism had melted and sent a signal as it died. We watched for way too long as that building sent up ghost alarms and no one could do anything with but wait out, hoping if there was a finger on the button that they would be found. Story 13. First party caller calling from a train station platform, didn't want to live and threatening to jump. Whilst on the phone, I pull up the timetable for that station. I see there's about 20 minutes until the next scheduled train. Responders are about 20 minutes away. Ooh. This is gonna be a tight one. Not even 10 minutes later, he says he can hear a train coming. I can hear the background noise from the guy moving closer to the platform edge, and he says he's going to do it. Then I hear the train's engine as it approaches. Clearly, it's not due to stop there. Then I hear the horn, some rustling, and the sound of the phone falling before the line drops out instantly. Immediately tell dispatch that it sounded like he'd jump. Try to call the number back, not expecting to be able to get through. It rings. After 5 or 6 rings, he answers. He tells me he got scared and couldn't do it. Then he says he's climbed down onto the tracks to make sure he doesn't chicken out again. Fortunately, once he tells us he's on the tracks, we can contact the rail signaler. They don't do anything for reports of threatening to jump from a platform or at a level crossing, but if there's a reported trespasser on the line, they'll put the trains on low-speed caution. Police arrive about 5 minutes later and convince him up onto the platform. He was detained for a mental health evaluation, but he lived. My blood ran cold for those 90 seconds where I thought he'd gone through. Not the worst I've had to deal with, but the others don't fit the question as well as this. I really hope that this guy got the help he needed. This obviously isn't a perfectly black and white situation, but I want to believe that with a bit of assistance, he could get back up on his feet and be doing absolutely fine right now. I'm always a little worried when it says detained for a mental health evaluation because, I don't know how often help actually comes from that. I feel like a lot of the time it just makes things worse, but I can hope, right? Story 14. I'm a police officer and sometimes take emergency calls. One day a woman was calling me, but at first she didn't speak to me. She was addressing another person in the room and told him repeatedly to put the gun away. That was her first sentence, and instantly I was like, oh crap, this is serious. Luckily, the woman was able to speak to me and told me in which area she was and to whom she was speaking to. With this information, my colleague was able to find out the address and send officers there. In the meantime, she told me she had her little baby and her husband with her. Our conversation repeatedly was interrupted with her telling the other person to put the gun away and not shoot her, and every second I was afraid to hear a gunshot and the aftermath. Luckily, the man let the family go outside his house. So after a few minutes, they were in a safe area. Turned out the family visited an old friend to show their newborn baby. The friend then got confused and couldn't recognize them anymore, maybe because of some form of dementia or something like that. He thought he had intruders in his house, so he went to the bathroom and got his gun. This took place in Germany, so guns are rarely a thing here. After all was cleared, my hands were shaking. Edit. I'd completely forgotten that when the family was outside the house, the woman told me that the man did make a call a few minutes before, asking another female friend to come over to the house. And when the family ran away, the car from said friend was passing them. So I was relieved for a minute that the family was safe, only to assume that another person was now in the house with the crazy gunman. Luckily, the friend wasn't threatened and was able to secure the gun and talk to the officers on scene. She was also able to bring the man outside so he could be arrested without much hassle. Story 15. It's been a while since I was a 911 dispatcher, but this story is one that stuck with me years later. For context, I live in an area near Houston, Texas, and this happened shortly after Hurricane Harvey back in 2017. Lots of homes were flooded and some even destroyed. I answered the phone and asked the caller what's going on. The person on the other line is an older lady, and her voice is shaking. She tries to tell me what's going on and tells me that her husband has been going through a rough time. He's lost his job, he's been spending a lot of money trying to fix their house after the hurricane, and their dog just died. She tells me that he's locked himself in our bedroom and I'm not sure what to do. At that point, I realized what's going on, and the pit in my stomach grew to the point where I wanted to vomit, but I didn't want to assume anything and was direct with her. What do you think your husband is going to do? She responds. Her voice becomes even shakier and cracks. She says that he's locked himself in there, and I think I've heard him load his pistol. My adrenaline spikes as I upgrade this call's priority, and at this point I can't do anything for the man locked in his room. I'm just trying to talk to my caller to keep her calm. We talk about how long she's lived at her house, the different stray cats she's fed over the years, how she really enjoys cross-stitching, but never ends up finishing any of her pieces because she likes the feeling of starting to cross-stitch but never has the patience to finish them. As we are talking, I hear a loud bang, and my heart drops. The ambulance and police were less than 2 minutes away, but it was too late. I keep the woman on the phone, making sure that she doesn't go into her bedroom, talking to her, keeping her as calm as anyone could in this sort of situation. After a few more moments, I hear pounding on the door and I check my map. The police are on scene. The woman's name was Evelyn. I tell her to go to the door and let the officers in. She thanks me for staying on the phone with her, but before she hangs up, her voice breaks one more time. She says he was the strong one. He was supposed to be the strong one. Story 16. I used to like reading about 911 calls or hearing 911 calls until I had to call 911 myself. My 2-week-old son stopped breathing at my home, and my husband and I gave him CPR before the ambulance arrived. Neither of us knew infant CPR, but our adrenaline just kicked in and we made it happen. We revived him, and he is now a healthy 7-month-old. He was having a febrile seizure, and we spent 9 days in the NICU. Story 17. My ex-wife is a 911 dispatcher. A few years before our divorce, she was at work on a cool summer night. They had the windows open in the dispatch center. Out of nowhere, she and a fellow dispatcher heard blood-curdling screams, and within seconds the phones started ringing. Across the street from the police department is a community center that is often rented out for parties and events. A large birthday party was being held there that night. As people were wrapping up and getting ready to head home, a large crowd gathered in the parking lot as people said their goodbyes. One family opted to start their vehicle and put their 6-year-old in the running vehicle. The 6-year-old began crawling and playing inside the vehicle, eventually putting the vehicle in reverse and running over a portion of the crowd. In the crowd was a 2-year-old little girl that had her chest ran over and died. My daughter was 3 at the time, and it really did some emotional damage to her mom. Story 18. Call came in on a night shift. Coming up to home time, so let's say 5 in the morning or so, I'd only been working as an EMD for a month or so, and this lady came on the line absolutely freaking out because she had the worst headache she'd ever had in her life. She gives her address, but when I ask her to confirm it, she replies with a sound like a record player winding down, then a thud, and some very concerning breathing sounds. Call immediately got upgraded to a Category 1, and thankfully she'd opened the door before calling us, because after a few minutes I heard the crew in her room telling me to hang up. I was due off pretty shortly after this, but when I asked for feedback on my next shift, it turned out she'd suffered a subarachnoid hemorrhage following a ruptured aneurysm. She'd gone in a hospital, so she at least survived that long, but I never heard anything beyond that. That sound won't ever leave me, in any case. Like someone's power cord being yanked mid-sentence. Chilling. Story 19. Got a call from an uncle who was cleaning his handgun. He stated he had the magazine out, but it accidentally fired and shot his 16-year-old nephew who he was visiting in the next room. The uncle went to the child but refused to do anything to help. He wouldn't look for the entry wound and refused to do CPR, stating he couldn't get the child from the bed to the floor because, quote, he was too big and he didn't know how, even after being told he would be helped through it and instructed how to. I could hear the child crying and gasping in the background until he passed away. The worst part about it was there was no remorse in this man's voice for what had happened. Like he genuinely just didn't care, on top of refusing to do anything to help his nephew. I'll never forget the sound of that child crying and gasping. I'm always confused why people like this would even call 911, assuming there was actually no remorse. It could have all just been shock, right? But the way OP's describing it, it does sound premeditated, or at least not what he wanted. It's almost like a sick ploy that he made OP listen to it. Like either this guy's straight up evil or truly just doesn't understand the consequences of his actions in any sense. Anyway, that is the last story for today. A pretty heavy one. So I'd suggest you take a minute, do something you like, talk to some friends, family, whatever, or just generally have a good time for the next little bit. Unless you're somehow emotionally not affected by this at all, in which case I'm a little afraid of you, but alright. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.